My guest today is Secretary of State Michael Adams. You're really going to enjoy this podcast as we talk about cleaning up the voter rolls. We answer the question about the dual clause in the oath of office for Kentucky. A lot of interesting and educational things today. Don't miss it. For over 40 years, I've preached the Bible as a pastor across America and around the world. I've led in the work of the local church. I've been actively engaged in the political process in both our state and nation. The purpose of the church is to stand. I've stood alongside veterans and first responders. My heartbeat is revival, and I refuse to sit on the sidelines. So buckle up and let's tackle the issues, challenges, and opportunities facing your family and mine head on. Well, good morning and welcome to the podcast. It is a joy to be with you today, and I have a very special guest. Our Kentucky Secretary of State, Michael Adams, is with me today, and I look forward to talking about a lot of things, talking about free and fair elections. One of the questions I want him to answer and talk about is, why do we have a dual clause? Why can't you fight a duel and still be sworn in as an elected official in Kentucky? That's always been interesting to me. The Secretary's been very kind to me during his time as a Secretary of State, and I've enjoyed going to the Capitol many times. 2 different times, he's invited me to give the invocation at the meeting of the college, the Electoral College, as they cast their votes for the presidential election. And that was a lot of fun. This past year, it was in the Supreme Court building before they closed the Capitol with all the remodel. So anyway, we're glad that you're here and we welcome you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Tell us where you're from and a little bit about who Michael Adams is.
So I'm a few miles from Monkey's Eyebrow, Kentucky, which is the Marshall-McCracken line. Grew up in McCracken County, not the city, but out in the county. My family's been there since about 1820, about the time that Andrew Jackson bought the purchase area from the Chickasaw Indians. Raised in a Christian household. I'm so grateful for that. A lot of preachers in my family on my dad's side. Great place to grow up. Great upbringing, not just in my family, but the people there, God-fearing people. Just a wonderful experience growing up. Then I went to college in Louisville. Went out of state for law school, but I came back. I really wanted to live here, and I've lived here most of my life, except for a short detour in Washington, D.C., working for President Bush.
Wow, that is wonderful. You've always been just a little different than the average politician. You've always been just a happy, joyful, positive person, not always serious or maybe not always guarded with everything. You've always been enjoyable to talk to.
Well, thank you very much. That's how I was raised, and it's funny, the first time I ran for office in 2019, my mom kept telling me, you need to smile more. And then in 2023, when I ran the second time, my staff kept saying, you got to stop smiling all the time. The tone of politics has really changed a lot, even in just a short period of time, especially on the Republican side. But I believe in being authentic. I can't pretend to be somebody I'm not. I'm a happy person. I've had a wonderful life.
Well, that's good. Now, you the first office you ran for was a statewide office.
Yeah, I went 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. I didn't do the city council or dog catcher. I went straight for the top.
Yeah, and you were elected Secretary of State first when?
In 2019.
And that was the first, and then you were reelected in 2023, and then and that was the first office you ran for?
Yeah, but I had worked for other people running for office over the years, some 400 if you add them all together across different places in the country. I started running campaigns professionally as a teenager before I was old enough to vote. I just always had that knack. I always liked politics and cared about the winners and losers. I'm glad on some level that I didn't ever run for a local office because it's a different skill set. It's just a totally different type of race. If you're running locally, it's about who your family is and all sorts of things that I just didn't have any advantages on. If it's a statewide race, it's more about the issues. It's more about the ability to communicate to reach people through media and other methods to make an argument. And folks don't remember because there's been so much water under the bridge politically since then. But I beat a former Miss America who was a very heavy favorite to win. She was kind of the last gasp of the Democratic Party. I spent most of that race down 15 points to her.
Yeah.
I didn't pull even till the very end. And I did that by running a campaign based on election integrity, talking about how we need photo ID to vote in our elections, which we didn't have at the time, how we need to clean up our voter rolls, which were very dirty at the time. And what I like about a statewide race is it's less about who you know or who knows you or your family. Because I would have lost the race against Miss America for a local office, right? But a statewide race could be more about issues, and I'm a very issue-driven person. So I was able to make that race a referendum on, do you want to trust the elections or not? Do you want to know who's voting in our elections or not? Do you want dead people on the rolls or not? And that's how I was able to beat her in a great upset.
Wow. I look forward to talking about those issues. I want to talk about involvement a little bit first. You started running campaigns when you were young. What got you interested in politics to begin with? Was that grade school, high school?
My family were very apolitical. And so I must have a recessive gene. I don't know where I got it, but for whatever reason, I just had an interest in it, a knack in it. A lot of it just came from my Christian worldview of, even in my early years as a kid, the social issues weren't as important. The country was more conservative, and then you begin to see a division. And certainly when Bill Clinton was running, that's when I began to pay a lot of attention to politics, and his worldview versus the Republican worldview were just so different. And I felt very motivated to stop Bill Clinton and to stop Democrats.
Yeah.
And very motivated by my social views, my social conservatism to get engaged. And I was kind of mildly critical that other people that I knew didn't feel the same way and weren't as motivated as I was. So the first campaign I ever worked on technically was a presidential campaign, but all I did was stuff envelopes and go door to door. The second campaign I worked on, the minister of my church in Paducah was running for city or for county commission. And the nice thing about a local campaign to volunteer is you can stuff envelopes if you want, but if you want to run the campaign, you can do that. They have no help. They need volunteers. So I got to get in at the top. I got to come up with strategy. I got to come up with a plan for what precincts to hit door to door, for how to raise money, for what we were going to spend the money on and what the message was going to be and all that stuff. So I went from stuffing envelopes for the president to actually helping run and strategize a campaign for local office at age 17. And that was a big rush for me, just being someone who's totally in obscurity to actually being relevant, right, in a campaign. And then someone else in my church ran for state rep, and I worked for her. And then she won in a huge upset. This was 94. This is when Republicans first began to show some strength in Kentucky politics, other than at the Senate level.
Right.
So that was just really exciting to have a win for a Republican in Western Kentucky. And I just have always had that bug, and I've always been motivated by my beliefs to go out into the public square.
Yeah. It's always been a tad frustrating to me that more Christians, more conservatives don't get involved. They tend to believe all the negative things about politics, but when you get close to public servants like you realize, wow, we can make a difference. Who makes the decisions, who leads, guides, and directs our state. And what I was surprised about is it doesn't take as many people as I thought to make a difference. For example, on issues, if you get 150 people to call a state representative or to call a senator, but I still have some level of frustration wishing more people would get involved in any level, whether it would be just to support a candidate, stuffing envelopes, or walking, or what have you. And I encourage folks to get involved in campaigns.
Well, I'm glad you do that. If there's one thing that drives me up the wall, it's that there are so many good people who do nothing. And I get it. My family's apolitical too. Their normal life wasn't working on campaigns, right? They go to church, they pay their taxes, right? They live good lives, raise good kids. And that should be enough, but on some level it's not. If there's something more that we can do, we should do it. And the great detachment of people today is probably the number one problem we have in our country. It's not just from politics, it's from other things too.
Yes.
The detachment. It's important to focus on your family and make sure they have what they need, but we're called to do a lot more than that.
Yes. Yes. What are the main responsibilities that the Secretary of State has?
So when I ran the first time, before I was famous, right, I had to explain that every time I met somebody, explain what the office did. I don't have to explain it as much anymore. The office is more prominent than it used to be. But I've got three main jobs and responsibilities under the Constitution of Kentucky and the Kentucky Revised Statutes. Number one, I am literally the Secretary of the State. It's an administrative secretarial role in a literal sense. I collect stuff. So every piece of legislation comes to me. It comes to me if the governor signs it. It comes to me if the governor vetoes it, and then the legislature overrides his veto, and then I sign those bills into law. I've signed hundreds of bills into law myself. Pro-life bills, tax cuts, you name it. Land records, I've got land records that go all the way back to before we were Kentucky, back to when we were part of Virginia. And my prized possession of my office is it's on parchment, a handwritten land survey by Daniel Boone.
Wow.
It's under special climate control and all that good stuff. Acts of the governor under the Constitution, every time he issues an executive order, it comes to me to sign. I have to make sure it's his signature, which I know pretty well now after thousands and thousands of orders from him. I don't have to like the order, but I do have to sign the order and then file that away.
Right.
I'm the chief business official. I don't set the tax rates or any of that, but every business in Kentucky, whether it's a big global company like Ford or the mom and pop where I take my clothes to be dry cleaned, everybody in between, they all register with and report to the Secretary of State what their businesses are doing, and we have all the reports on our website. And then last but not least, of course, I'm the chief election official, and I'm actually and this is not a brag necessarily, but I'm the first person to run for this office, making elections the focal point of the office. The several people who ran before me, they were all 31-year-old junior lawyers at corporate law firms. And that's not a criticism. That was their experience. That's what they knew. And so they ran on the business side of the office. But that's not what I did for a living. I did election law for a living. So I talked about the election stuff. And I don't think that I would have won if I had not talked about elections. Because people care about it, especially now.
Yeah. Yeah. You referred to as the voter rolls as being dirty.
Yeah.
And you did a lot of work to clean them up. Tell us about that.
Well, to give you a little bit of background on it, we had a Secretary of State before me who openly defied both federal law and state law and just simply refused to keep the rolls accurate. And I'm going to give the Democratic Party a little bit of grace. There was a time when the Democratic Party believed in clean voter rolls, and here's how I know that. Wendell Ford, when he was governor in the early 70s, our rolls were so dirty that he literally got a new law passed to make everybody re-register to vote because our rolls were so unreliable. He threw them in the garbage and passed a law through a Democratic General Assembly to make everybody re-register. And then when he went to Congress...
Now, he made everybody re-register in the state?
He sure did.
And in the 70s, Wendell Ford made the whole state re-register if they're going to vote.
Yes, he did.
Wow.
And then when he went to the Senate, do you know what the first major bill he passed was in the U.S. Senate? It was the National Voter Registration Act, which has a lot of stuff in it, but one main thing it does is it requires states to regularly maintain their rolls and to take I think the wording in the law is all reasonable efforts to make them as exact and proper and correct as possible on a regular basis. So literally, Governor Ford became the senator and passed a law making Kentucky do what he had already done, keep the voter rolls accurate. And so there used to be no partisan difference on having accurate government records. Why would anybody in politics not want government records to be accurate? But that changed. We had a Democratic Secretary of State who came in and for whatever reason just chose to not do that. And then when the elections board tried to do it, she sued them to stop them from doing it. So once I came to office, I was a new sheriff in town, and I said, we're not going to do it that way anymore. So we have been extremely vigorous to the point of being sued on making sure that we have these rolls that are accurate. We have taken 750,000 voters off our rolls.
750,000?
Out of we've got 3.45 million people on our rolls. So You do the math, but that's about 1 out of 5 voters that we took off the rolls.
Wow.
We've been extremely aggressive.
Wow.
And we're going to, we get sued, and that's the price of doing business, unfortunately. But we never lost a case because we follow the law. We take Democrats off. We take Republicans off. We take independents off. We take dead voters off. Most of those people we took off were dead.
Yeah.
And some had been dead for a long time. We had people who were dead in prior decades and just sat there on the rolls. But we're also taking off people who were alive and voting, so they can't vote in our state in some other state. So part of what I'm being sued about right now is we got a law passed that allowed me to take people off if they move to some other state and register to vote in the other state. To me, that's pretty simple. If you move to Ohio or Tennessee, I don't want you on the rolls anymore. You're voting over there.
Mm-hmm.
They told their Secretary of State in Tennessee or Ohio, we vote here now. That's great. You're not going to be on our rolls anymore. So I have a partnership with other state secretaries where we trade information, who's moving in, who's moving out. And I'm being sued to try to keep me from being able to do that. And the only rationale for that is to let people vote in multiple states, which I cannot accept.
Right. So they're suing you so folks can vote in 2 states, 3
That's
states.
exactly right.
Wow. It's hard to believe. I know you hear outlandish conspiracy theories, but we're talking about reality of what goes on, and folks would actually file a lawsuit to try to keep you from cleaning up a voter roll.
Unfortunately, in this current era, the left has so much money and they don't even know what to do with it. And they just sue everybody all the time. They, for all the talk about democracy that you hear on the left, they hate it when Republicans win elections and they sue them to stop them from doing their job. So I get sued basically all day, every day. And it's almost entirely these left-wing groups that have more money than they can possibly ever spend. And they sue every Republican in America. They sue the legislature. They sue me just to keep us from doing what the voters put us in office to do. It's crazy.
Wow. Now, do you believe that Kentucky elections are free and fair?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
The Constitution requires that, and I swore an oath to do that, and we've done that.
Yes.
Now, vote fraud's a real thing. I'm not going to pretend it's not. There are some people that say vote fraud's a myth. It does never happen. That's a lie.
What's the most common vote fraud?
I can tell you, I looked at this real closely before I ran and then since. And in the last 25 years in Kentucky, there has been only one type of election fraud that has led to a conviction. There have been allegations and whatnot, but like clockwork, here's what election fraud looks like in Kentucky. 3 things are present. Number one, it's an election for a far down ticket office. It's not president. It's not the Senate or governor. It's someone running for mayor in a small town or county judge in a small county. And the reason that's critical is very few votes are cast. It's a small jurisdiction. So vote fraud counts for more because you just don't need as many votes to win, right? So that's the first part. The second part is it's in a place that has high poverty. That's why Eastern Kentucky is where you typically see vote fraud because of the poverty. And the third thing you see is that the office where there is vote fraud attempted, it's for an office that has money. It's patronage that can hire a bunch of people into the school district or into the county government, or they have contract authority to pave driveways or whatever it is. When you take those 3 factors, it's your perfect storm for vote fraud. So what we have seen, we saw it in the Attorney General, both Daniel Cameron and Russell Coleman have been very good partners on this, is we watch all these elections, but we especially watch the ones down ticket. That's where people feel the safest cheating, but that's actually where we can catch them the easiest.
Sure.
And every single time, and there's now been dozens of criminal convictions for vote fraud, it takes the form of vote buying, a place where people are poor. You give them a bottle of whiskey or $50 or $100 to buy the votes.
Sure.
Fortunately, we've been very vigilant on this, and the laws that we've passed the last few years have helped us catch these people in ways they were able to evade detection previously. But that's what vote fraud looks like in Kentucky, and it still happens, but we catch it and we put those people away.
Is ID required to vote in Kentucky?
It is now. It wasn't until 2020. That's the first thing that we did when I got to office.
So up to 2020, you did not have to have an ID. You could just say, my name is.
So technically, yes, as a matter of law. There were some county clerks that told their poll workers to ask for an ID. And some didn't. And then even though you had some that asked for ID, the voter could just say no. And there's nothing the poll could do about it. They'd say, oh, okay, then. Right. So it was actually hard to get a photo ID to vote law passed because people thought we required it, but we didn't. People were just accustomed to being asked and just going along. But people would say, no, I don't want to give you my ID, I don't have one. And they just let them vote anyway. You got to have one standard that's universal for everybody. You can't have the county clerk in Fayette not asking and the county clerk in McCracken asking. That's not fair. You got to have one election law and one standard. And people forget, but I came in 2020, and 2 months later, COVID hit, and I got a lot of encouragement, including within the GOP, to drop photo ID to vote and just let it go. And I just refused. And people said, you're nuts because the governor's closing all these offices that give out the IDs, right? That prove identity. You got to drop this. And I just refused. And we pushed it over the governor's veto and we got it done. And I don't think.
So the governor vetoed.
He did.
The ID bill.
That's the first bill I signed into law because the legislature came back in and they sent it to me over his veto.
What did the governor want? Just to allow folks to vote without ID?
Yes.
Wow.
That's now a mainstream Democratic politician position. Now we've polled it. Most Democrats support photo ID to vote.
Right.
Most everybody of every demographic, African Americans, everybody, any demographic you could poll, they all support photo ID to vote.
Yeah.
But on the left, the politicians are against it because interest groups are against it.
Right.
Now, I'll respect the governor's position. I understand it's complicated to ask for photo ID when these bureaus are closed, but I thought we need to do it anyway. And I'm convinced that part of why voters in Kentucky had confidence in our election in 2020 is because of the photo ID law.
Right. Are the voting machines connected to in any way the internet?
No, absolutely not. We actually have a law that we wrote and passed that says they can't. It's a felony to try to hook one of these things up to the internet. We don't want the internet touching these things.
Are there any states that you are aware of in America that the voting machine is connected to internet or the internet helps or aids with the counting of votes?
I'm only aware of California using the internet to tabulate their votes. And what California, I think, would tell you is we got tens of millions of people. We got to do something to count these things quickly. And I would say to them, well, number one, you don't. And number two, y'all take 3 weeks to count your votes anyway. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. But the vast majority of states, including our state, do not and have never used the internet to count the votes. People think that they see a website with the numbers going up. Well, that's inputted by us. That's not coming because there's a wire from your voting machine into some master computer. That's not how we do it.
So no wire, no wireless, no internet.
Absolutely
connection.
not.
It's all mechanical. It's a mechanical.
So we actually don't have voting machines in Kentucky. What we have is ballot scanners, and this probably, probably maybe resonates with some of your audience. But when I went to high school, most of my tests were multiple choice, and there was a little optical scanner in the principal's office. The teacher would take your tests and then run it through, and then it would come with little red marks on your answers if you got them wrong. That's the level of that was in the 80s.
Right.
That's the level of technology that we're using to count votes. It's that simple and that old-fashioned.
Wow.
And we also have a law that requires us to do hand counts to double-check the machines. But when you see the results on election night, we would not have results on election night if we didn't have a way to count them quickly.
Right.
And that requires some technology. But we're using 80s simple technology, simple appliances, and they're not connected to anything at all.
Yeah.
They're standalone ballot scanners.
How many people work for the Secretary of State, and what size budget do you have?
Not many. Depends on the day, but 30 to 35 people is about the size of our office. We've conducted a lot of attrition. We used to be a lot bigger. We've tried to automate more of our services online. If you're a business in Paducah, you don't have to drive to the Capitol to do something. You want to do it online and be quick about it and save yourself a trip.
Right.
And I respect that. So we have tried to spend more on technology to upgrade and improve that experience. And then we've not fired people, but we've let them retire. We've let them, we've got rid of positions as people have retired.
Yeah.
And so we've really shrunk the office. Our budget is $6 million a year. That's out of a multi-billion-dollar state budget. And we actually don't take any tax dollars. Everything that we use, that we spend, it's all generated by us. We charge a business, whether it's the mom and pop dry cleaner or Ford, we charge them $15 a year to renew their business. registration with us. And just on those tiny transactions, we generate enough revenue to pay for all of our expenses.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I have been to the swearing-in ceremonies of a lot of folks through the years, and first time I heard it, I thought that was sort of funny. They ask, have you ever fought in a duel? I'd never heard anybody address it, talk about it. For some reason, I'd never looked it up. Why do they do that? So we were at the Electoral College in
Yeah.
Spring Cork, and you explained it. You talked about it. So tell us why the duel clause is in our oath of office.
So the first time I heard this was when I was sworn in as an attorney, because all officers of the Commonwealth, and that includes attorneys, they all have to swear the same oath. And it's a very long oath. I don't have it memorized. I had to look at a cheat sheet to get it. But among other things, you swear fidelity to the Constitution. We all do that. We also swear that we have not fought a duel with deadly weapons or seconded or aided a duel. And the reason that's in our Constitution is actually not just in the current Constitution. We've had it going back several constitutions. Is we had so much political violence in Kentucky in the 1800s that as a deterrent to keep people from killing each other, we basically added a provision to the Constitution that made them ineligible to serve a high office, or really any office. They couldn't serve in public office if they had ever dueled or fought in a duel. Now, we actually had presidents who were duelists. Andrew Jackson was a duelist.
That's
right? People, they don't know their history sometimes, but we have a very violent history in America. And you think of violence being something in bad neighborhoods. Yeah, sure, but there was violence at the top too. There was an honor code, especially around the Civil War era. You had members of Congress who, on the floor of Congress, were bludgeoned almost to death or slashed with knives. It was a thing of honor. And there was a concerted effort to try to stop that, and to start essentially with the upper class, who were the office holders at the time, and say, well, it's legal for y'all to do this, I guess, but if you do it, you can't serve as the governor or the senator or the secretary of state. And that helped put an end to it.
Yeah. Aaron Burr, the third vice president, who was the grandson of Jonathan Edwards, the great preacher of the Great Awakening.
Yeah.
He dueled Andrew
Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton. Yeah.
Yeah, we lost Alexander Hamilton, one of our great founding fathers, to a duel. So I'm glad that we put it into it.
Yeah.
And there have been efforts to take the duel clause out of the Constitution. I personally am glad it's still in there, because it's a good reminder to people when they see us getting sworn in that this is still a thing, that if we're not cautious, we'll be this way again. And you're seeing political violence.
Sure we are.
We don't need many reminders, but it's good to kind of have a gut check and remind people, like, this is our natural state, man is flawed. We can't succumb to these temptations.
Yeah. I was impressed by your explanation during that Electoral College, and to bring that this is not a laughing matter.
Yeah.
It really isn't. It shows who we are in humanity and how that needs to be checked and controlled.
That's right.
That was neat.
Thank you.
Now, why is it in the state of Kentucky that we are now, and now I became the pastor here in 91. My first trip to Frankfort probably was 92 or 3, and it was mostly Democrat. But that has changed. We have a supermajority in both the Senate and the House. All of our state offices are held by Republicans. Why do you think we continue to, majority of the time, elect a Democrat governor?
So you could ask the same question in Vermont, where they have maybe the most liberal state in the country, but they have a Republican governor who's very, very popular. The most popular governor in America is the Republican governor of Vermont. This is the state of Bernie Sanders and socialism, right?
Wow.
And the reason is, when you vote for a federal office holder, the issue set is different than when you vote for a state office holder. And so Kentucky used to be a Whig state. And then the Democrats didn't do too well here for a long time. And then the issue set changed. And then Democrats won elections, and they did for 150 years, more or less. And then the issues changed again. We're a state that's been voting for Republican presidents my adult lifetime. Every time we voted for a Republican president, we voted for Republican senators in my adult lifetime every election. But we still have a lot of people who grew up in the New Deal era and remember Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman and JFK as Democrats who were for more government spending on uh, agriculture programs or welfare programs or education or pick your issue. But they were strong against communism, right? And there were no social issues really in American
Right.
politics in that era. Those are more new. So a lot of people they see themselves as Democrats, but they'll split their ticket here or there. We still have a lot of people like that. We still have a lot of counties that will vote 70% for Donald Trump, but 60% of the voters are still Democrats in the county,
Right.
and they'll vote for Democratic local officials. So the short answer is the issues are different.
Right.
If you're voting, do you want to have Republican national politics or Democratic national politics? It's an easy choice for Kentuckians. It's a harder choice, though, sometimes when do you want Bashir politics or Republican politics? Because Bashir politics is not seen as far left as, say,
Right.
Nancy Pelosi or AOC or people like that. So the governor has done a good job of saying, well, I don't define myself that way, and then talking about education, economic development, talking about pocketbook issues where those are just less controversial, right? So I know a lot of people
Yeah.
who've voted for Donald Trump and then voted for Andy Bashir.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not one of them, but
Right.
I understand.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And looking at those numbers, I have the turnout and all of that.
Yeah.
Just looking at that, how do we compare to other states in our participation? How do we do as far as voting participation in Kentucky?
Not very well. We're near the bottom of the country, and that's not a new thing. We've expanded the number of voting days to give people more opportunity, and the turnout numbers have been more or less flat. Tennessee.
So that has not helped? Adding more days to
Correct.
vote has
And that wasn't my goal. My goal was just to make it reasonably convenient for people.
Yeah.
I'm from a working class family. My mom used to not vote and dad used to not vote, and now they can vote on Saturday. It's super convenient for them.
Yeah.
I think there should be a reasonable level of convenience. But I didn't have goals of changing the turnout per se. That's really the voters' decision. But I will say Tennessee has 2 weeks of early voting compared to our 3 days, and their turnout is lower than our turnout. So I don't think there's a magic wand that you wave to get your turnout up. The truth is the South just has lower turnout and has for 150 years. Our culture we're unfortunately less philanthropic. We're less civically active. On all sorts of metrics, Kentucky, unfortunately, is just more like the rest of the South and other parts of the country. We're just not politically engaged here.
Do you encourage folks to get engaged?
I sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I need to be nonpartisan in the job I have, but I do encourage people to participate and to volunteer and to vote, of course. And something I've been trying to get done, and we'll see if it happens, is to get civic education in our schools. It's terrifying how
That's a good statement.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So I saw a survey recently, and this is really alarming. The word socialism polls very well with young people, high school age people. They don't know the lessons of history. They've not been taught.
Right.
They don't know the history of the Soviet Union and China and how they treated their people, how they exterminated millions of people. They don't know how evil communism and socialism are because no one told them. And I grew up and I learned all that because it was fresh because I grew up during the Cold War. But they didn't. They don't know this stuff. We are failing to teach our kids our patriotic values, our love of country. The word patriotism also is not highly rated among people. They don't see themselves as patriots. They see themselves as socialists.
Right.
They want to be more like Europe and the rest of the world and less like us. We've got a real job ahead of us to try to make sure that we inculcate our values to our kids. And that's mostly done at home, and it should be. Raise your kids right. But a lot of folks just don't. And we need our schools to step in and teach our kids these values. My office did a survey last year, and we found that the average Kentucky voter, not just the average person who lives in Kentucky, but the person who's voting in Kentucky, doesn't know that there are 3 branches of government, doesn't know the name of a single local official or legislator. They'll know who the president is, and maybe 7 out of 10 will know who the governor is, but the vast majority don't know the most basic things about the government. And I think that's part of where the political violence and the rage are coming from, is people feel left out, they feel not heard, they feel impotent because they have all these views. They don't know who to call and how to get anything done. I think it's a huge failure to our kids that we don't require them to know the most basic things about our country and our system of government and our way of life. If you go back and look, and we did, you go back 170 or so years ago to when our government, our state government first required public education. It wasn't in the Constitution. They had to change the Constitution to get it in there. The reason they did it was not to train a workforce or to prepare students for college. Those things weren't necessary then. Everyone just worked on the farm. You didn't have to worry about jobs, right? The reason they created public education was to make sure that we trained citizens for self-government, that we could have a sustainable representative democracy. And we're getting away from that. And our kids are getting their information from TikTok, which is Chinese owned.
Yes.
They're finding out what they think about their country from a bunch of propaganda videos from China. That's terrifying.
One of the reasons that encouraged me to do a podcast was because growing up in Southeast Kentucky, and most all of my family were Democrat growing up, and I was Democrat, registered Democrat here for many years until changed a few years ago. But pastors and Christians were told, "No, stay out of politics. It's none of your business. Don't talk about that." But as I began to read history, starting with Columbus and why he was looking for better trade routes, why he wanted to come and discover new lands, you look at the 1600s with the Pilgrims, the Puritans, they wanted religious freedom. You look at the early 1700s and the move away from their faith. They had become successful, so we needed those preachers in the 1700s that brought about the Great Awakening, Jonathan Edwards. Had it not been for the preachers that were talking about those issues, we would not have become a nation. They fired the first shot as far as saying, "Look, we can't be controlled by England and have no representation." And you know, we're going to lose everything we came to America for. And so as I read that, and I read the involvement of pastors in education first to say, hey, this is our American history. We have a Christian heritage. Our heritage is connected to the Bible. That's who we are, and we have to get involved. And then, of course, we saw, and I think everybody was shocked, you know, Charlie Kirk was very popular, so much so that the progressive or the left or group saw him as a threat to, and you know, but it was a threat to socialism. It was a threat to communism. It was a threat to ignorance, and so there is a great need. So one of the reasons I wanted to have a podcast is to have folks like you to say, this is American normal. Patriotism is who we're supposed to be. So I really appreciate these conversations and the instruction and the information that you've given today.
Well, thanks so much. I'm so glad that you're doing this. You help edify the public. And to your point, we wouldn't have America without Christianity. And it's not just the revolution, right? It's also the civil rights movement. Every development that we move forward as a country, we wouldn't have had it without God, and we wouldn't have had it without our Christian beliefs being in the public square.
How do we get civics back in our public school system?
Well, we need to get our legislators to require it. Right now, it's a local decision, and 15% or so of our school districts do require it, and 85% don't.
15% require, 85% requires no civic education, so children can grow up and have no idea why we have president, how we have a president, or anything about government.
So there is a modest requirement of social studies, but there's not a course. There's not something specific to say you're going to go learn these things about our history, about how the elections work, and so forth. I want to make it a requirement. What my model is to do what Allison Ball did, our state auditor. She said, we got to make sure our kids are financially literate. They know how to balance a checkbook.
Yes.
And our schools aren't teaching that. And so she got the legislature to require a specific course. I think it's a half-credit course. That's a really modest, reasonable expectation. I want the same thing for civics.
That's awesome. I'd like to talk about that again at a future time.
Sure.
Last question. Capitol is under construction. Your office is a few miles away. I was there a few days ago. How long will it take the Capitol to be refurbished, and how much money?
It'll be finished long after I'm gone. I have no doubt about that. And I think it'll be $300 million before it's over. Let me tell you what I know, which is not much. So this is a long-term project. The goal is to have the Capitol open again in January 2029 for the 2029 General Assembly. My term ends in January 2028. So I will not be the Secretary of State at that time. Will I be in some other office? We'll see, but I won't be Secretary of State anymore. Somebody else will be Secretary of State for a year before that building ever opens, best case scenario. But I'm told it's possible they won't finish it in 3.5 years. It could be 5, it could be 10. And it's seemingly every day they dig deeper into that building and they find another problem that's going to take time to fix. And let me give you my 2 examples. So you remember we had that big rain in April and some flooding. We had so much water from the roof. I was on the ground floor of a 3-story building, and I had 4 computers and a copy machine destroyed by rain. That's how little that roof protects us against water. That if it's a heavy rain, 3 floors were destroyed.
Wow.
I literally had a staffer who had a tree growing out of the earth into her desk. That building was built, it was finished in 1910, and it's never really been upgraded to modern use. And it was hard to get a cell phone signal in there.
Yes.
I've had to do Zooms for 5 years, 6 years. Getting Wi-Fi to do a Zoom was almost impossible. I did some national TV programs where there wasn't a good signal. I dropped out. It's embarrassing. So this is long overdue. I'm really glad they're doing it. I wish they could do it quicker, but there's just a ton of work to do.
Sure. Thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
You've answered a lot of good questions, and yet there's a lot of conversation I would like to have, and these issues are important to our state and to our nation. I thank you for listening and watching today. I trust you've enjoyed the podcast. Let folks know about the podcast every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Have a great day.